Hello, Cardstack community. This is Chris C., the founding director of the Cardstack Project, coming to you today to give you an update on the Cardstack product strategy. So a lot of the communication we've done so far has been talking about the framework, and about the architecture, and about the thinking of the ecosystem. But eventually, someone's going to ask, so I like Cardstack, I like the idea, how can I use it? How do I use it? What is the product? What is the thing I can get my hands on and actually understand what it is? So that's been a question that a lot of people have been asking me, and so I want to give you guys a sense of what are all this infrastructure and all these basic building blocks that we're putting together, how do they add up to something that can be experienced? So one way to look at it is who is in the ecosystem, who is participating in what they call the Cardstack way of doing things, the Cardstack economics or economy, or the system that coordinate different users. So there are users who are the end user who are choosing Cardstack because the open source software that is user-friendly is cheaper and better than what they know today, and they see this as a way to find the tools they need. So what they're looking for is best selection. So we build a card catalog, different open source distributor and contributor put their code together. This pool of software code provides invoicing, provides communication, all the things that you have to use, 15 different apps and 40 different subscriptions to do is now available under one kind of catalog. And if that catalog is well priced, so there's not a lot of extraction, it's really going to the rewarding the creator and the makers, then we can probably get past that savings to the end user. And finally, best service. It's not only supported by the developer, but also service provider, much like a WordPress host will give you update and security update because they want you to keep using the services. All the people here in this ecosystem can provide the service as part of the network so that people can get the service. But with all that thing you're getting, it could just be $5 a month for everything you would need. Everything that you need to do your work, you pay one subscription, and that funds essentially the ecosystem and provide the reward for everybody coming on. And that's the key for the developers. The developers want something that not only allows them to make money, but also easy to learn to build. So it's actually something very high leverage for them to do. And if there's a large number of users trying the different cards and looking at catalog for what they need, that's going to be a broad distribution that's going to grow every day. And then this is also pretty important for developers is that there should be low or no operating cost. If a developer decides to make money and do a software as a service or host a service, they will have to pay for the servers in hope that the user will eventually freemium subscribe to it and start paying. Our Cardstack ecosystem, as we'll detail a little later on, will hopefully shift the cost to the users because the users are basically pooling their money together and pooling their purchase power into a thing so that the developer actually don't have to worry about hosting. That's provided by someone else. So what we're aiming to do is to create a unified SDK that's both the front end and back end. It's all both the token ecosystem and the user experience so that developer can make these cards, these mini applications, create them, deploy them, and upsell them even, the premium tier, all within one system. One set of software to learn, one JavaScript-based SDK for them to learn. Providers are people who are helping to deploy software. So this is similar to people hosting WordPress or hosting a certain open source package. They take what the developer built, including plugins and stuff like that, and say, hey, I'll deploy it for you and I want to host it. And what's interesting about this is that it's very sticky. Once you're running your website or running an application with a certain provider, you're more likely to stick with that provider over time. So we want to have that kind of recurring revenue, creating incentives for a service provider who knows how to operate in cloud to come in. And there has to be sustainable margins, which means if I'm going to actually go and provide this service and support the user, I want to be able to say that this is not a race to the bottom. It's something that my relationship with the customer actually get differentiated. Now, with that being said, we believe that users should have a choice to say, hey, I don't really like this host that's hosting my blog or your WordPress blog. Let me switch. It's always possible. And with our open source approach and the fact that our data is also portable, that's going to be really nice. But providers should be able to run a good business because they are the people creating that kind of justification and sharing it, and in some cases backing that $5 a month the user is spending, because that's where the values, the ecosystem will come in. So we want to build one stack that can manage and deploy to any containerized cloud. So we use Docker and Kubernetes and all these kind of cloud deployment software technology to be able to take the Cardstack and say, I would like to operate a Cardstack-based service. Now, obviously, to get it started, ecosystem, the foundation, and the Cardstack community can go and run different hosting services. But eventually it becomes competitive, and it could be competitive not just on price, but because on latency, you're running within the country, you have servers within a certain data center that's very fast for the people in nearby cities, and that's going to be very hard to do even from an Amazon Web Service data center. They don't have certain number of point of preferences. So we really want to make sure that people can take that open source code, not only the framework, but also the UI code for the features of the card, and deploy it in any type of kind of commodity cloud provider. So the cloud provider is not getting the margins, the support and the people who are building on top of cloud provider becoming a Cardstack service provider is giving that margins. And for businesses, and this is something I've been getting some questions on, is like, would you guys, target business? But the truth is that businesses are just a bunch of users pulling together part of an organization, part of a organization that would be subscribing to Slack for $6 a month. They want dependability. They want the software to be maintained, and if we do it in an open source way, and we give incentive to develop to keep moving and keep using, that is actually much better than like, oh, someone built a little startup and then they go away because they got bought by Facebook or something like that. So we want the code base to be dependable, to be available. And they also want the community to support it. And this is the reason why it's so important to train a group of developers and service provider on what does it mean to build on Cardstack, because they're going to provide the services. If something go wrong, if a plugin or a certain database driver needs to be updated, that can come from a community. And we have observed in the open source community, people will go ahead and buy maybe premium plan that get added to the cost, maybe more than $5 a month if you're doing a business subscription, to provide that additional level of dependency. And finally, cost effective. And this is something that we find focus a lot of energy to make sure the stack that Cardstack depend on, our database, our servers, Postgres and Node.js and stuff like that, or even the blockchain software, are something that is cost effective as possible. So we're not going to use expensive parts that would be prohibitively expensive to say, oh, you have to at least spend $35 a user before you can use, let's say, Salesforce.com's platform or something like that. We won't have that because it's based on this kind of open source technology, no license fee underneath it, beyond the package value that we can provide the end user. So the business essentially want white label software that has open source code as a core. As you can see, all this stuff kind of comes together in this kind of a overlapping grid where we want to have this four-sided market between the users, the provider, the developer, and the businesses to provide this one kind of set of experiences where Cardstack's in the middle. So the question is, how do you begin building a system that has all these overlapping pieces? And that's been our focus in the last, I would say, 6 months or so, is focusing on both the developer experience and more recently figuring out onboarding providers on being able to figure out the token mechanism to allow them to participate at the economic value of this network. So let's talk about developer first. So between the developer and users, the intersection there is developer is providing cards or software code or features to user through the catalog. It's like an app store, you publish to it and people can pull from it. And that's how we can work together to build a greater feature set. That's how the catalog is at this intersection of user and developers. Between the developer and provider, it's more of an economic relationship. Developer builds a lot of really interesting tools, but here's the thing, how do they get paid? Or do I donate to someone Patreon to give them $5 a month and maybe that's enough? But if enough people are hosting the software, paying good subscription revenue, and you get hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people doing this, then suddenly you have a reward pool. And as a way to make it sustainable, for the margins and the value to be sustainable, the software has to continue to get maintained and improved. So we want to see that the user value, which means what the user pays to the provider, some part of that could be a small portion, maybe a larger portion of the community choose to go that way, will go to the developers, either the one that's building the software they're using today, or part of the pieces of software they're using based on some sort of analysis of actual usage. So the reward is what goes from the provider's cash flow into the developer, because the developer code is what's driving that usage from the user and therefore making them willing to pay. Between the businesses and the provider, we need to figure out who deserves to get paid what. So this is where the tally protocol comes in, which is a calculation of how much is each person getting? How many gigabytes of storage? How many thousand API calls? And these are all information that exists either on-chain or off-chain or in the cloud, and we need to find a way for the business system provider to come together and say, hey, we agree to join this network, and then we'll look at the shared accounting and say, we respect and honor what's been accounted for, and we'll distribute the money as Tally would tell the network. And finally, business and users. We are thinking about something called flow, which is these objects that exist that encapsulate data and functionality, but when they move between organization, an invoice moving in, a payment going out, that's where business gets done. So between business and users or business users, it's about the exchange of cards, and that's the workflow system that I think is going to be at the basic aspects of it, combining conversational UI as well as logistical and chaining of action sequencing, what we call card flow. So those are the four main intersections. But let's take a little bit of a look more into what we're building for developers. So for developers, they wouldn't be able to put things in a catalog unless they build these cards using our SDK. And I'll get to a little bit more on the detail on that, on what that looks like. And that card SDK is deployed to a hub, which is basically the server. Now, the unique thing about the server is that in most system, most website, you will have the developer run the server, and then you store your files or your notes or your pictures on the developer server. And that developer could be an indie developer, and they do little thumbnail photos, and then they become Instagram, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. But the idea here is that the server is in the developer's data center. They control it. In our situation, the developer builds to the hub, but the hub is actually run by the service provider. Right? And each user can say, I have one service provider run my hub. All my code, whether it's note-taking or music making or image editing, is all storing in that same hub because that's my server. That's my little personal cloud. And the developer can test their code against the hub, but when it's actually deployed, the hub is written to your particular chosen thing. It's almost like you have a Dropbox, and then you connect different apps to it, and all those apps are written to your Dropbox, and you can sync on your computer, instead of having your data locked somewhere else. And iCloud is doing something similar. So the idea here of Hub is an open source version of that. So we released two posters on both the Card SDK and Cardstack Hub and how they work together. So that's the two component that's the most important, and that's what's behind me right now. So Card SDK is a composable UI system, which means that the user will be able to build and use the card that's been built. So in this particular kind of poster, we highlighted 4 different types of cards that exist. One is the stuff that is more like content and data, right? So a content card would be a blog post, could be an image or something like that. That can be, someone can make a card that allows you to edit it and do rich text editing. And then data, it could be a forms, can do a validation, it could be a survey. And then assets, and something would be a little bit more like a data card, but it may track some external database that tells you what the conversion rates are. If you're doing currency exchange or cryptocurrency exchange, it would tell you what the USD value for a certain Bitcoin or Ethereum would be. So data, content, and assets are these kind of units that instead of being screenshots, they actually are live and real apps. Now, action cards are a little bit more like a strategy. It's like, how do I, send something to someone? How do I extract the fund? How do I use this decentralized exchange to convert this one asset to another asset? How do I take this data and put it in now my customer relationship management CRM software? How do I take this content and publish to the web and get it cached and distribute it all around the world? So action cards are a little bit special, but they all go into the card catalog. And then when the cards are made in a card catalog, the user experience could be one of 3 things. If developer really believes in card UI and they want to build an entire standalone website indistinguishable what you see today, they can compose these cards together into a full experience that takes up the full screen. Or they can just say, you know what, I like this card, I want to take this data card, service card, embed it within my Slack or my website or my workflow. Then you can embed it the same way you embed a YouTube video into a flow. So the card is not rendering this transparent box here, but just the pieces in there. And then if you have another website, say, hey, I actually have more than enough capability within this website. What I want to do is be able to show some list of cards to pick. Like, hey, I want to send someone, equivalent of 5 $5 worth of cryptocurrency token just for fun, which address do I want to go from? Then we can use an overlay, a dialog box to say, hey, I know that this user has 7 different addresses or 8 different addresses, pick one, and you click one and it sends that. So whether it's standalone, embedded, and overlay, they're all just different way of packaging these cards that's in the catalog for the user to see. But what I'm going to focus a little bit more attention to is that there are some cards that are a little bit more special. So identity representation cards are special. So a credential, a login, right? So that's a card, here's a form, username, password. But when you have that form, when you're that credential, it's almost like an ID card, like a government ID. You can use it to bypass a sign up. You have a credential card, you can use the overlay, pick it up, and then suddenly you're going to another website or another card-based experience without having to log in again. Subscription, and obviously if you subscribe to a hosting, you can create content without worrying about free limits and stuff like that, but you can possibly also have cross-honoring. So this subscription is honored through 3 or 4 different types of website. As long as they all accept Cardstack's subscription, you get a pass through all of them. It's almost like those class pass where you can take yoga classes from anywhere in your town once you buy a subscription. So this subscription will be cross-honor because that's a membership. It's something that's deeper than just the payment. You're joining a community. It could be a corporate membership that allows you to access certain features that your company has paid for. It could be a personal membership because you have a high tier and you get more premium template, getting a nice little pool of new features if you like go to the Gold tier or Platinum tier. These are all things that we can do, but they are just cards in terms of the capability. And once you have these kind of identity representation, then you can go ahead and say, you know who I am, and if I need to go something and upload something, could you create a situation where you can deduct from my balance? You know, people really like Amazon because they have their credit card stored on Amazon, or they like Starbucks because Starbucks can reload their balance whenever they need it. So you can create these kind of same currency or payment method things where you can choose whether you want to deduct from a balance, you want to reload using a credit card. These are all things that's part of the card UI. The reason why we separate this out is that a lot of the protocol, what we're thinking about, the economic model to make this sustainable is really about using this type of identity and payment cards as the basic connection between different instances or different service provider and allow them to share mutual customers and also bill mutual customer for the service they do. So that's one aspect of it on the front end. So this would be the UI. So it contains templates and schema definition and data source mapping. But the idea here is that these are mini apps that gets aggregated together into kind of a super app, whether it's standalone, embedded, and overlay. To power all of this thing, you have the Cardstack Hub, which is acting as a go-between between these cards and the rest of the world. Now, the rest of the world can be many things. Like the data sources that Cardstack Hub connects to could be the cloud, and that's where we have 99.99% of what goes on web application and mobile app goes to the cloud. So we should be able to connect to the cloud, ingest it, integrate it, invoke services, call APIs, and all stuff like that. But obviously, blockchain is just a type of software that's running in a peer-to-peer network. Instead of data centers, they're combined together so that you can go ahead and interact with the node and deal with on-chain contract and stuff like that. So Cardstack Hub has plugin for Ethereum, has support for integrating with different smart contracts, and that allows it to treat the blockchain as if it's another data source. And obviously on the device, there's special storage on your device, and that can also be exposed to an API, or the device could be server-side devices, like a hardware security module for key signature, or it could be on a future secure enclave when those API become more mature. The idea here is that once you have the Cardstack Hub, the SDK, or the card that's built using the Cardstack way, can talk to any hub and get any of the services necessary to get the data it needs, query it, or send some content over. Here's a card, send it to that person. The inbox of that person is just another space or another type of queue within that person's hub. So that's the basic idea between the SDK and the hub. And those are the things that I've been working on for a long time. The Cardstack SDK, we're focusing not on the capability of rendering and indexing, that's all already kind of done, but just making the experience that much easier for the end user. The hub is quite mature. This is something that's been running on multiple apps and is running continuously in the cloud to be able to show us how we can actually continually maintain the indexes so that if you make a transaction on a blockchain, it automatically reflects in all the cards that uses the hub as data source. But to bring this SDK and hub together in a decentralized way, we need something a little bit more. And that's where the protocol comes into play. So think about it this way. If you only have one SDK and you only have one service, right? So let's say you have Instagram and the Instagram SDK, or you have Salesforce.com as the app server, and then you have the SDK for Salesforce.com. You, as a developer, can only deploy your software to one company. But in an open source and open network approach inspired by blockchain, implemented using open technology and kind of smart use of different data technology, we can build what is essentially a multi-currency payment and billing network. Now, we're going to get into more of that detail of what the card protocol is as far as a smart contract a little later, but let's just give you a basic idea of what it is. The basic idea is that the card protocol allows a user to choose any service provider who is running a hub and say, I pick you to help me store my image file. I pick you to help me manage my wallet. I pick you to help me count my sales. I pick you to help me process credit card transactions. I pick you to help me process cryptocurrency transactions. So the users do not have to have one card SDK go to only one hub. They can actually have different hub and different service providers serving different cards, because of course some a service provider is very good at dealing with data, especially analytics, may not be the same service provider that's good at dealing with content management system. So, but you can have the same card SDK, the same cohesive experience, and then let the Cardstack Hub syndicate out who is actually providing those services. And when those providers provide a service, then you can build the protocol. So you pay as a user, as a customer, the protocol and pool the funds together in something we call reward pool. And then based on usage, based on the rendered service, the service provider will get a portion of reward pool based on what they actually go on. So let's take a look at the diagram here. So there's a six-sided system here. So we talked about the three things, the reward pool and the render service. Reward pool is what deposit goes into it. So if you put in $5, then there's $5 in the reward pool. If you bill for 10 cents because someone did something that cost 10 cents, then you add to this how much usage you bill for. This hub will report the data to the protocol and say, hey, this user that has a relationship with me and is my customer is now billed for 10 cents of that thing. So that's deposit and billable usage. So as far as that's concerned, it's pretty simple, right? And withdrawal will come out. How much can you take out of the pool? Well, based on how much as a service provider you provided. So what is all this stuff with spendable balance, market rate, and purchase, right? Like deposit withdrawal makes sense, billable usage makes sense. It turns out that the other one, the market rates of purchase and the spendable balance, is really a need when you're doing multi-currency payment network, which is that if you want to pay with not just a certain type of token, let's say the card token or DAI or ETH, but you want to pay with USD, we have to figure out how much that value the token is worth when you purchased it, how much that currency is worth when you perform the service that cost the billing, so they can shift the risk between the buyer and the seller so that it's as if they were exchanging money, currency, or token at the time of the performance of that action. So to do that, you need to have a market rate oracle, a service that keeps track of, hey, when do you spend that? When will usage due? When do you use to buy it? What token do you use to purchase it? And that information is captured when you purchase it. What currency or asset did you pay with? Whether that's Ether, ERC20, card token, DAI, maybe other type of supported asset, and then USD, which requires us to say, okay, at this moment, USD is worth this much. And then spendable balance would be determined by how much is left in this particular pool. So let's say you put in British pound as the purchase, and then suddenly Brexit happened and British pound half in value, then most likely your spendable balance will be half, because it's only fair that the service provider will not take the risk in the currency exchange. Now, If you have performed the service and it's already been billed for, then the service provider would take the risk if you already paid them $10 or £10 or something like that. So the card protocol, which we'll go into more detail, coordinates between the 6 things to ensure that people understand that this is a fair network, that if you're providing services and billing or buying it, you're gonna get what your underlying asset or underlying deposit is worth. We'll get to that more in this detail in the future, but that's the basic idea. And Cardstack becomes the type of system and network that you join, and you know that you can actually build mutual customers in a fair and accurate way. Okay. So that's kind of what the developers can do with the Cardstack Hub and what the providers can do. And Tally and reward, those are the 2 aspects of it. So Tally is market rates and reward is this on-chain smart contract that locks the tokens and the equivalent token. So if you pay in USD, we'll lock an equivalent amount of the stablecoin pegged to USD, so we can actually on-chain measure with some off-chain conversion data exactly what it's worth. But it's a little bit more going on there. So let's take a look at what the billing part of the provider is going on. To bill a user, we need to know what usage is done. So the hub is deployed to one of the clouds. It could be Amazon Web Service, Azure, or private cloud, or even more secure ones. And then based on that deployment, the hub is reporting data about what has been used, and sometimes it could be subscription. That's easy, every 30 days. If there is a monthly subscription, you just say, hey, that person is still in good standing. If that person doesn't dispute it, then cancel the record. That's going to be the case. And with that particular subscription or the billing, you have to make sure that there's something that is deposited, and that's where the cryptocurrency wallet can. Now, this wallet can come from the end user, or it could be someone say, hey, if you want to buy $10 worth of this, token protocol-based thing, you pay me $10 plus a fee, and I will stake or deposit $10 worth of token that allows you to get $10 worth of service. So that's the stake pool going on. And the stake that's been deposited from this wallet, and this wallet will be the cryptocurrency wallet, backs the value of the billing entry. So someone knows that, oh, there's 100,000 USD worth of stake in this smart contract, so I can feel confident that if I'm billing up to 100,000, there's money there and value there, so I can withdraw it. So this is all transparent on-chain, the billing. Now the billing will most likely going to be in a side chain. We're working on a temporary measure to use our server to do it, but we are intending to shift it to either sidechain or plasma chain, so we can see both of that in a consistent way. That billing funds a reward, so it depends on not only which service provider gets paid for, like hosting your files or providing any type of database services, but the developer also get the reward. It could be a percentage of it, high or low, and so that's how the developers, by making the Card SDK, gets paid a portion of what the provider is earning because of the code the developer has made. And Tally is the mechanism where we can calculate, and again, Tally right now is running on top of Cardstack Hub and provides great ability for us to leverage infrastructure for calculation, to create portfolio and stuff like that, and use that same infrastructure to determine the reward. And finally, the stake, not only for people who are staking to deposit, but also for service provider and businesses that say, I want to have a say in how this network operates. I want to determine the rate that we're going to pay open source developer. Too high, then service provider will be not interested in providing services because they're not making sustainable margin. Too low, developer which is not going to be built on Cardstack. So there's an opportunity to use the same mechanism of the stake pool as a way to govern the network, to determine the values on these kind of important cutoff percentiles and percentages that allows this operating to balance the interests of these 4 parties. So that's kind of the blue part, is kind of like a high-level overview of the protocol. So I won't go too much into detail of the other parts of this ecosystem, which is about what tools we get for the user, the card space experience for them to organize the card and find them, card flow, allow them to communicate with each other and businesses, to join networks, to get notified when something happens on it, and for businesses to actually provide their own price list so they can use the Tally mechanism protocol to bill for their service, not just like low-level services providers bill for, but let's say you provide some sort of a validation service, or you provide some sort of underwriting service, or you provide some sort of quality assurance service. You can actually bill for that service, and then Tally will say, oh, that business, which is not a provider, they're not doing hosting, but they deserve $2 or $10 or $500 for that service they have. But this is the basic ecosystem connecting not only wallet, clouds, and chains, but also making sure that this is part of the web, that you can go to a domain, go to different card spaces, which are websites on the Web 2, Web 3.0, but once you join that website, that on-ramp is part of this greater network. So Cardstack is at the core of this four-sided market between users, developer, providers, and businesses. We want to be able to provide everything the user needs at a good price with good services and good selection. We want developer to be able to choose our network so that they can say, hey, this is how I reach the largest audience on the web, not just on one mobile operating system, but actually something that is part of the web and is accessible by the web, and therefore that's the largest possible market. We want to be simple in the way to deploy this stuff so that providers can compete on both price and services and geography. And then businesses can white label the software and build the future type of blockchain-based network or cloud-based network that is collaborative so that they work together, whether it's a consortium or an existing business network, to be able to use Cardstack as the basic runtime to form these relationships or to enhance the relationship and reach users in new ways. So I think it's a very exciting vision, and we see the steps we're doing, the little boxes, that's intersection to be important building pieces until we build out this full ecosystem with all the participants and the value network connected in a seamless way. So we are preparing for the beta launch of Cardfolio, which we released an alpha and open source version in January. This is based on the latest Cardstack Hub as the backend, and we have improved our integration with the Ethereum network, and you will be able to plug in your MetaMask and use Cardfolio's query engine to figure out what's in there. Now, obviously, that's step one. With that particular capability, you can imagine many, many features that interact with smart contracts and Ethereum network, maybe even beyond that once we are plugging to support other type of protocol to be able to make that your asset orientation. This is your wallet, your portfolio. This is the things where the asset that has some sort of value beyond just your content, which is in more of a library. That I think is a very important aspect to introducing people to not only blockchain but also decentralized finance. So look out for that, and it's going to be our first consumer-facing product. And the Italian card protocol is under active development. We've been working on the Ringgit testnet, and that should go on to testnet for other people to use. And obviously, the card token is the native token, so that you can use it to redeem services. But we'll also support that multi-currency, so you can basically convert and stake other token like DAI, like ETH, Wrap ETH as type of a deposit to use Cardstack services, and then the conversion is done inside the smart contract. I'll give a more in-depth talk about the protocol and the user interface that we have developed for Italian card protocol probably within the next week or two. And finally, those who have been keeping track of our development progress knows that Jen Weber, who is our developer focusing on the framework, is giving us ongoing updates on what we want the developer experience to be. We published something on the Quick Start Guide, and we're also putting together a comprehensive documentation of how developer can build on a SDK. Our goal has been that it's very easy to build a very powerful framework that is relatively hard to use. The real magic comes from building a powerful framework that brings back-end and front-end concept and package together, but then make it so easy to use that once you define a schema and some template, and suddenly you have a card that can get just automatically deployed. We're working on a command line right now, so you can actually deploy to Cardstack Hub in the future. Push your code into a catalog with just like one command line. And these things has been proven, like Heroku and Netlify has been proven to be a really important part of developers, that they want to be able to be successful almost immediately. And that framework does all the hard work, and then so the developer can focus on the features of their card. So I hope this is a useful overview on not only what's behind me, which is the kind of more developer protocol aspects of it, but also what all this thing adds up to. Our goal at Cardstack is that we believe it is possible for the web to become an ecosystem, not just individual website fighting for ad dollars or competing on who has the most pop-up. I really believe that there's an opportunity for us to turn this amazing experiment we call the World Wide Web and reboot it using cryptocurrency, using blockchain as a way to bring a network, but most importantly, really digging deep and understand what kind of open source software that's been developed in the last generation can we bundle together and package together and provide a comparison that is as attractive as a Android and iOS ecosystem. The web is a very, very big place. And I think with the right abstraction, with the right bundle, right tools, and more importantly, with the right ecosystem participant acting in both their self-interest, but also in the interest of the network, we're going to get there. And hopefully Cardstack can facilitate and be the catalyst of that movement of Web 3.0. Thank you very much for your time today, and I will talk to you soon about other topics, but I hope this is helpful. Thanks.